Hello and welcome back. I wanted to go over something that I know a lot of you probably thought about, is all the different engines in the C4. We got a delivery today, and it looks like another part from one of our suppliers. And oh yeah, Mac Auto Parts. So what do we got here? We got power antenna. All right. I wanted to go over the engines that we're dealing with in the 1983 to 1996 model year of the C4 Corvette. And it went through quite a few different changes, not only cosmetically, interior, exterior, but also in the engine. In 1983-84 model of the C4 Corvette, it had the L83 crossfire injection engine, and here's a picture of it right over here, or here, or here, or there. Somewhere in the editing is going to be a picture of that L83. The 1983 L83 crossfire injection only had 205 horsepower and 290 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels. In 1985, Corvette switched to the L98 engine, and that was the tune port injection with the injectors, the plenum, the throttle body all across the top. And for that one, it had a horsepower of 230 horsepower at 330 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels, which is a very low number. But considering the time, what we were going through with the late 70s, early 80s emissions, and basically taking engine's power and capping it for the emissions. The L98 engine that was in 1985-86 model years had a 230 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque, like I had said. But in the late 86, they switched from the iron heads to the aluminum heads. And you can tell the difference if the bolts are on the outside or perimeter of the valve cover, you have the iron heads. If they go down the center line of the valve cover, or roughly the center line of the valve cover, you have the aluminum heads. That's an easy way for you to determine what engine you currently have and what it's made up of. In 1987 to 1989, the L98 engine came with 240 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels, which is another gradual step up in horsepower and torque. In 1988 and 89, the L98 engine that came on models with 3.07 rear-end gearing were able to achieve 245 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels. Also on that, they took the air diverter and the air switching valve, which were two items on the front left of the engine, top front left of the engine for the emissions, and they made it into one unit. That's also an indicator of what model year that engine is that's sitting in your C4. In 1987, the B2K twin-turbo Callaway C4 Corvette came out, and that one's L98 engine boasted 345 horsepower and 465 foot-pounds of torque to the rear wheels. it was a significant increase in horsepower to the point in time, and also showing what twin turbos can do to that L98 engine. In 1988 and 89, the B2K twin turbo Callaway C4 Corvette came with a whopping 382 horsepower and 562 foot-pounds of torque. Now you got to remember, I'm excited about these numbers because this was back and after engines had been routed for being too heavy on gas and outrageously overpowering the vehicle that they're in. These were all items that came about during this time frame. So these numbers are really good to me. Right now you have 500 and 800 horsepower engines that sit in a passenger sedan. Yeah, so, you know, it is what it is. It's the time frame. We have better engines now. We have better performance now. But this was a classic car. In 1990 to 92, in 1990 to 92, the L98 came with 245 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque. And it seemed like a step backwards. The C4s that had the 3.07 rear-end gearing, they had 250 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque to the rear end. You had the Callaway, and it's a specialty Corvette, so at the time it was the monster. And it was a good car. I mean, great. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail here in a second. On the side note, this was the horsepower. Oh. So you understand, engines used to be measured by what they were dynoed. And then in the 70s, that changed so that they were dynoed with the transmission and rear end in the production vehicle. So you could get true numbers of what you're going to get to those rear wheels. This was to counter the marketing hype that the big three were using about their engines, but putting them behind crappy gearing on both the transmission and the rear end gearing. This was fine-tuned for the C4 Corvette, and of course, you know, the years of the 700R4 transmission being used fine-tuned that to almost perfection. And when it rolled into the, I believe it's the HL04, I forget. I'll look it up, or I'll display it in text. That transmission, mated with the rear-end gearing, definitely did help the performance of the Corvette. And then for the 1990-91 B2K twin-turbo Callaway C4 Corvette model came out with 403 horsepower and 575 foot-pounds of torque to the rear end. This being the apex of the twin-turbo model of the C4 Corvette from Callaway. A derivative of the B2K twin-turbo Callaway C4 Corvette that came out was an 880 horsepower monster. And its code name was Project Sledgehammer. I'm going to try and put a link to the article when it came out in the 80s, showing and talking about this Corvette, and I'll try and put it up here. And basically, it went 254.76 miles per hour on Ohio's Transportation Research Center in October 1989. This was astounding because they drove it from Connecticut to Ohio, and then from Ohio back to Connecticut. So at the time, it was the fastest street-legal car. Another engine option in the 1990-92 was the new V8 on the block, the LT5. Now, there's a lot that goes with this, and I'm going to do my best to get you through it. I might have to look at my notes, and this video might be chopped up quite a bit already, so you're going to get more of that. The ZR1 1990-92 with 375 horsepower and 375 foot-pounds of torque. The aluminum block V8 was the same bore center as the L98, but with 4 overhead camshafts and 32 valves. Lotus, yeah, this is at the time when GM had purchased Group Lotus, so they were working for GM. had designed the air intake so you could shut off half of them when you're at half throttle, but when you romped on it or stepped in it or put it to the floor, the others came to life. That way it was more fuel efficient that time, and worked out much better for the engine. Those ZR1 a power output of 375 horsepower at open throttle. And yeah. So, in 1993-95, the LT5 ZR1 came out with 405 horsepower and a 385 foot-pound of torque monster that started showing the true meaning of what it meant to be an engine in a Corvette. In the 1992, there was another engine that came from Chevy that rested in the C4 between the engine mounts, and it was the LT1. The LT1 came with 300 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque, which to me, compared to the LT5, was a step down. I don't know why that was. I think it had to do with the actual power curve and the feel that you got from it. There are articles that described Chevy or GM testing the two different, the overhead, there are articles that talk about when Chevy was testing the overhead cams compared to the center cam, and using multiple cams and timing and complicating it all, and just having the standard cam with push rods and lifters. And it talks about how it felt when you put your foot into it. And I think that's why the LT1 came about. That wasn't the end of the LT1. In 1993 to 95, it came with 300 horsepower, 340 foot-pounds of torque. And in 1996, it also came with 300 horsepower and a low rating of 335 foot-pounds of torque. So the LT1, in my mind, wasn't that great, but the complexities of the overhead cams and the timing and everything, and of the LT5 ZR1, you know, I guess I'd have to drive one to get it, because I have not driven an LT5, a powered Corvette, so I can't make a determination. In 1995-96, the Corvette came with another optional engine, the LT4. This was a 330 horsepower, 340 foot-pound torque motor, power plant, whatever you want to call them, pushing that power back to the rear wind where it could do its best work. A side note, the LT1 and the LT4 had the OptiSpark, which put the pseudo-distributor in front of the engine and behind the water pump. So the water pump, if this was the front of the engine, the OptiSpark went here and then the water pump went here. The Opti was a two-part low voltage side and high voltage cap and rotor section like a regular distributor. And if it got wet or the seal somehow failed on the OptiSpark and some moisture or rainwater or whatever got into it, that was it. It was dead until it dried out or you got it replaced. On the LT5, it used the lost spark or the wasted spark method, which basically meant it sent voltage to two different spark plugs. One was the one that was supposed to on the fire stroke, and the other was just wasted on an exhaust or something stroke. And that's how that worked. All these engines were the small block 350 V8 for the C4 model of the Corvette from 1983 to 1996. If you were lucky enough to drive one of the more powerful ones like the LT5 or, God bless you, the twin-turbo Callaway, I would consider yourself pretty lucky. I don't think the owners of the existing ones would just let anybody take them out for a spin, no matter how good of a driver they are, because they are very rare. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please smash that like button. I wanted to thank you for watching this video. If you really liked the video, please smash that like button. It really does help out the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you want to be notified of videos when they get released, please click on that notification icon so that you can. I want to thank you all. And again, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It will really help out the channel and allow us to bring more videos, more content to you. All right? You have a great night. Thank you very much.